Alessandra Tocco, the president of the New York Alternative Investment Roundtable. And today I'm pleased to introduce our 5 for 5 series. The series highlights 5 women who've had long careers on Wall Street, answering the age-old question, what advice would you give your younger self? In this segment, we are fortunate to hear from Allison Berman, who is the president and CEO of Palisade Capital Management, a private asset management firm launched in 1995, which currently manages approximately $5 billion of client assets. Allison joined Palisade in 2011. Prior to that, she was a corporate attorney at Skadden Arps, where she specialized on advising clients on M&A transactions, both in the public and private markets. Allison graduated from the Cardozo School of Law and Brown University. Allison, thank you so much for sharing your thoughts on your career with us today. And I'm going to ask you that age-old question. If you could go back and talk to your younger self as you were starting in your career, what advice would you have?
I don't know where to begin. You know, there are times I wish I could hand the secret manual to younger Allison and it would be made up of little pictograms like an IKEA catalog laying out, you know, where I should have zigged and zagged along the way, but that would have taken a lot of the fun out of the journey. But in all seriousness, if I really could go back and give myself one real piece of advice, it would be to never be afraid to be yourself. Always stand up for who you are and give yourself a voice. I think that, you know, when I think of my career, and especially at the beginning, and even throughout my life at that time, you know, I had this self-inflicted wound that I find many women in particular and successful women suffer from, and that's self-doubt. And it's something that I really had to work on overcoming. And if I could tell younger Allison, it would be, don't be afraid, stand up, have that voice. You know, this self-doubt that holds many, many people back is something I think we need to explore where it comes from for ourselves individually so we can overcome it, but also understand where it comes from, because I do think it's something many women in our industry face along the way. And there are aspects of the culture, particularly in the financial services industry. I came up through, you know, the legal side, but very much on the, you know, deal side, the M&A side. And there are these subtle messages that are given to women, some of them not so subtle, some of them very overt. And those are messages that, you know, to succeed as a woman, you have to almost play a certain role. You have to fit in a certain way. You have to dress a certain way. You have to act a certain way. And, you know, it's almost as if that women have to fit into a certain archetype in order to be successful. And, you know, younger Allison listened to those messages. And that was a big, big struggle for me, because it planted these seeds of self-doubt, because I think the natural consequence of many of these messages of dress a certain way, present yourself a certain way, have a very negative consequence, and they morph into messages of conform and fit in, not just in how you present yourself, but how you think and how you give voice to things and to your ideas. And then, you know, that creates all these, you know, groupthink, all these things that there are books now about of how we need to avoid those traps. So I would tell younger Allison, you know, be yourself, stand up for yourself, and, you know, never be afraid of who you really are inside.
I think that's great advice. And I know, you know, having been a banking executive for many years, The guys had no problem asking for more money, and the women never asked for more money and never came in to advocate for their bonuses. And we had some programs where we were trying to change that, but it's when you manage a team, you really do see the difference. So that's wonderful advice. Was there anyone along the way who really helped you? Did you find any sponsors to help you think outside of the box and to, embrace yourself versus the group think?
It's so interesting because I look at myself in a particular generation of women coming up in business and in women, who have real careers. And I give credit to my family. My whole life, growing up, it was assumed I would do something in business. And I never had these, messages. It was something that was, just part of everyday life. Oh, and when what field would you like to go into? But as I, think about things, I feel like there was this generation ahead of me of the glass ceiling breakers. And I did have one woman in particular who was a fantastic mentor for me in many ways. And she was part of this glass ceiling breaking generation. And I think she gave me both some great advice and also some not so great advice because, for her to be successful in business, she had to fit into a certain type of mold where, she definitely spoke up for herself, but it, some of her advice came with these aspects of also, if they're going to take you seriously when you step in, you have to present yourself a certain way. You have to show up a certain way. And yes, advocate for yourself, but there are kind of specific ideas on how exactly to do that. And, I think, with advice, you always have to take everything with a grain of salt. I think if it weren't for her, I would not have done many of the things that I've done in terms of business, in terms of my career, in terms of even taking risk. But I also wish she didn't give me that lecture about the appropriate footwear to wear when going into a boardroom.
That's certainly basically from my generation.
I'm sorry. No, I don't mean to interrupt. I think for me in particular, these messages of dress a certain way, I think that holds us back. And that holds us back as individuals. And that's something that held me back as an individual for a long time. I think as a woman who didn't always fit into these traditional conceptions of femininity, as a gay woman, to be in an environment where I felt like those were pieces of me I had to hide. And when I was able to step into that and kind of, I don't want to sound too West Coast, but, actualize myself and lean into that and really embrace that within myself, it made all these other things that I think when we talk about advice we give women of, ask for more, don't be afraid to speak up, don't be afraid to ask questions. All of that became so much easier for me when I was able to say, hey, I'm not going to fit into a traditional role. I'm going to be, who I am. Believe me, I didn't show up into boardrooms wearing, ratty cool clothes, but I was able to find things that expressed who I was, were appropriate for the environment, but also allowed me to be who I was.